Hello and welcome back to the Rubbish Talk podcast with myself, Heather Beattie.
And myself, Alistair Meldrum.
So we've been chatting a lot of rubbish for 5 episodes now and want to thank everyone who continues to listen and support us. We're really keen to share our knowledge and our guest knowledge and experience with the wider population and help people understand how important your rubbish really is. So we appreciate everyone tuning in and sharing it with your networks or anyone that you know. That would be really appreciated as well. As usual, myself and Alistair start each episode by mentioning some trending stories or updates from the waste and the resource management industry. So we have a few to run through this week, and I think we'll just kick straight into it, starting off with Alistair from previous rant from episode 2, if you want to fill everyone in.
So I'm going to hark back to it. So in episode 2, I discussed what I thought was a little bit of an issue about people purchasing or donating benches to the seafront, for example, at Ayr, but then using them for putting, flowers, wreaths, all that type of stuff. And I got a bit told, not quite told off at the office here. They all told me I was a bit grumpy and a bit mean-spirited. But I was out for a walk along the beach the other day, and I got an ideal example of a bench that had, I think it was four sets of flowers on that took up the whole bench. And I thought, here's a good picture, so I'm going to share that picture. So rather than going into too much detail about it, what we're going to do is we're going to share that up on our Rubbish Talk blog page, and people can have a look yourself. And I think, without being too mean-spirited about it, my thought is that if you donate a bench, you donate it to the public. It's not really yours, as a, if you like, a shrine, if you want to call it that. And then there's also some examples of wreaths that have been sitting there since before Christmas that are not looking the best now. And then you've got a sort of waste management issue of the waste management officers have got to come along and cut these things off, because they're often on with cable ties and that type of thing. So we would love to hear your views, and hopefully there'll be a few people that are as grumpy as me and think it's not the most appropriate idea, but we will see. We will see.
Yeah, I'm convinced that you've been on a search for something to back up your opinion, since how most of the office disagreed. But I mean, I have saw it, so I can totally get it from that point of view. So we'll let everyone have a look as well to see what we're talking about and see what they think. But it's funny because when you first brought it up, I think I said, oh, it's not something I'd ever thought about. And I think a few people in the office said the same. But now that the topic's been in my head, it kind of leads on to the next thing that I saw, which actually came from Twitter as well. So kind of related to this, there was the topic of lanterns being let off. So whether it's for a memorial service, or I know sometimes people do them at weddings or big events or whatever, and they look lovely. However, there's the issue arising of where do they end up. So I think what we saw on Twitter was the fact that it landed and it's got kind of metal spokes in it, and I think there was animals there, and I think that was the main issue that kind of sparked the conversation between me and you, Alistair. But that led on to us discussing the really serious kind of health and safety and the fire risk of them. And we managed to find it. Alistair remembered, I think it was actually 2013, so it was quite a while ago, 10 years now. But there was a huge fire in the West Midlands, it was, and it was from one of these lit lanterns making its way into a recycling plant and caused huge fires. So yeah, it's just one of those things that it's something people do without realising the impact. So normally we're talking about the waste being left and it being unsightly or someone else having to clear it up, but with a lot of things, it's also a massive health and safety risk as well. So that was really interesting. Just a wee thing on Twitter that we saw, and it turned into a bit of a deep dive because Alistair remembered the news story. So
I'm pretty impressed with you. Pretty impressed you managed to find it. Actually, I was sort of. I wasn't, when I first told you about it, I wasn't 100% sure if I would imagined the story or not, but I do remember. So it's good to, and we'll share the link and you can quite clearly see in the video the Chinese lantern, coming across in front of the camera, landing in the waste pile, and then before you know it, the whole pile's up and smoke. So well done for tracking it down.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. And obviously the amount of plastic that was on site as well, the smoke and the fumes, you can imagine, was horrific. So yeah, it's quite important to think of these things.
Yep. In other news, Zero Waste Scotland has issued a construction waste portal, and this is down to the fact that a huge quantity of waste that's produced in Scotland is down to construction activities, whether it's building houses, schools, whatever. So Zero Waste Scotland's put this portal together with a number of partners to try and improve how waste is managed in the construction sector. I'll be totally honest, I've not had a chance to delve into it, but if you again, we can put a link up to this, but if you Google Zero Waste Scotland construction portal, if you're interested, I'm sure you'll find further details. And when we get around to it, we'll have a closer look at it and see what's involved. And then the other thing that came up fairly recently is we've talked previously about the deposit return scheme, and that's been hitting headlines quite a lot recently, with various companies coming out and saying there's issues with it, we should delay it. There's other companies, organisations coming out saying we shouldn't delay it. But one of the interesting things, one of the sort of things that hadn't been sorted out was the way the VAT was going to be treated in terms of the deposit. So the deposit is 20 pence. So in theory, if you apply VAT to that, that would then take the deposit up to 24 pence. So the Treasurer, HMRC, has confirmed there'll be no VAT on the deposit. But the little sting in the tail is that if the containers are not redeemed, that company would need to pay the VAT portion of the non-redeemed containers. So if, for example, if a shop sold 100 bottles and they took back 100 bottles, then there'd be no VAT payable. Mm-hmm. But if they sold 100 bottles and only take 50 bottles back, then there'd be VAT payable on these 50 bottles. So effectively, it's not a 20 pence charge, it's going to be a 24 pence charge. So what are these good companies going to do? They're probably going to increase the price to a customer by 30% to cover themselves. Sorry, not 30%, 30 pence to cover themselves. So it's interesting. I don't see much debate about it. Nobody's really picked up on that point. I think they were just glad that the VAT wasn't been applied in the first place. But that's what's ongoing at the moment. And then the other issues with the DRS are public knowledge. I think they're out there in the open at the moment, and there's been quite a lot of debate about it. So watch this space, as they say.
Yeah, we've been harping on about it for a while, but it's definitely now reaching, for a while it was just our industry talking about it and thinking of all the consequences, but now the public are involved, which is good because it's good to hear people's input and what they think and how it'll affect them. So yeah, I assume there's more to come from that. I think we'll maybe just keep that as a recurring theme for the next however many months until August, if it all goes to plan. So yeah, that's the latest update from there. And I think that's kind of most of our headlines this week. Anything important? I just wanted to add in, we're obviously all about sharing resources and knowledge. So there was a really good Switch webinar, the Switch Forum do monthly webinars, and the February one was held on the 23rd of February, and they had Scott Butler from Material Focus and yourself, Alistair, as host. I won't forget you, discussing the topic of disposable vapes. So we had a really, really good turnout, great audience participation as well, a lot of questions coming from people and discussion. So thanks firstly for everyone who tuned in, came along. But for anyone who didn't know about it or couldn't make it, the Switch Forum always record and upload all their webinars and host them on their website. So make sure to check that out. It'll be live from, I think, probably the 25th of February. It should be on their website. So you can go and have a look at that. So thanks everyone.
Sorry, that it was a really good session with Scott. Scott had, lots of knowledge in terms of vapes, and there's so many issues. There's so many complexities to the vape issue. You've got the vape that's got the battery that we've talked about before. We've got hazardous waste in terms of the nicotine. You've got plastic. You've got lots of recycled material, and these things are designed to be disposable. And then you've got all the sort of health effects of young people getting addicted to nicotine, seen as a real fashionable thing. There's so many different angles to the vape, and I think the vapes will be as popular a subject for us as the DRS will be. The really exciting bit about doing that webinar was hosting it and discovering that Teams had changed their settings. So we did have a little bit of an issue with the screen views we had in terms of seeing people and not seeing people, which made it a bit more interesting. But no, a good session. And if people have forgotten what SWITCH is in terms of the acronym, it's the Scottish Waste Industry Training and Competence and Health and Safety Forum. So we've talked about this before, that the waste industry's got a really bad record in terms of killing and injuring people. And this is a charitable organisation, not-for-profit organisation, that tries to sort of share resources within the waste sector, both to try and educate and get people into the sector, and also to improve health and safety standards across the sector. But as Heather said, we'll put a link to this if anybody is interested to share the vapes webinar.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a great one.
We do have to say we've now got nine international listeners from around the world, totally around the world. So we'd love if one of you did actually get in touch with and get in touch with us and give us some feedback. But our number of international listeners is growing. Our number of UK listeners is also growing. Pleased to report on my podcast, the original one is still in the lead, but only just. Laura's one from last week has got quite a bit of uptake. And we've been looking at stats a little bit, and we have seen quite a lot of different podcasts loaded in one day. So we're a bit worried that somebody's maybe binge watched this or listened to us, which hopefully not. Hopefully you've not had to suffer us for more than an hour.
So anyway, I think it's time we've rounded up everything. So we'll go straight into our chat interview with the guest for this week. So we had Robin Baird, CEO at Cireco. We had a really great chat with Robin about his career, but he also shared some quite insightful overall life advice, I think. He also quoted a wee bit of poetry for us. In his own words, so we can link that as well, which it was really interesting. We think it sums up some rules for life in general, so we can link that and you'll hear him talk about that in the episode. So we'll dive right in and enjoy this week.
Right, well, good afternoon. Welcome to Robin Baird, our guest this afternoon. How are you, Robin?
Not bad, thanks, Alistair. Looking forward to it.
Good, thank you.
Good stuff. So, Robin, just to kind of kick us off, for anyone who doesn't know who you are, can you tell us a bit about who you currently work for and a bit of background about the organisation?
No problem. Hi, I'm Robin Baird, Chief Executive Officer of Cireco Scotland. Cireco is quite unique, probably a bit like me in terms of unique, and people can take that how they want to. They're probably good unique and bad unique, probably both covers that. Cireco Scotland is an arm's length organisation wholly owned by Fife Council. So quite unique in the Scottish context in terms of it's the only one of its type in Scotland. There to manage waste and resources to as best we can, and to take advantage of the fact that we want to create important infrastructure for Scotland and take advantage of that and really start to set out what can happen if you manage your waste and make the decisions, not just necessarily about profit, but make wider decisions about infrastructure and employability and all those sorts of things, and what you could do if you have that core tonnage behind you. So that's kind of how we do it. Work with other partners as well, which allows to do that. So we have quite a wide-ranging portfolio of things that we manage. 2 landfill sites, 2 materials recycling facilities, an anaerobic digestion plant, 11 recycling centres on behalf of Fife Council. So we have a sort of wide gambit of kind of infrastructure that we manage, and also shortly to principal supplier into 2 energy from waste facilities that are either about to be completed or just started construction. So huge in terms of our coverage, in terms of the sort of infrastructure and what we manage. And it's really sort of trying to make those decisions to make that critical infrastructure available in Scotland to others as well.
So to give people an idea, what sort of tonnage do you do annually for, through these facilities?
So collectively, we'll probably be about 250,000 tonnes per annum between our facilities. When the energy from waste facilities kick up and running, that will probably increase to about 330 to 350,000 tonnes a year. So huge in the Scottish context in terms of the total tonnage managed. So quite unique from that perspective.
And so to give people an idea, and if they can't visualise the tonnage, so your council bin lorry, probably 12, 13 tonne payload?
Yeah, probably between 11 and 12 and a half.
Yeah, so it's a lot of bin lorries.
A hell of a lot of bin lorries, yeah.
Good.
Yeah, I think you seem like a bit of a all-round expert. No pressure, Robin, for the rest of the podcast, but you've got a really kind of wide range of everything that we've spoke about thus far with people. So hopefully you can give a perspective on a kind of wider basis and knowledge from all angles, which is great.
Yep, hopefully. No pressure there though.
Yeah, I did say no pressure. Don't worry.
No pressure at all. So in terms of it, how did you get involved with waste management? Where was the starting point?
Oh,
I think I actually know about this story. I've just remembered actually. I think I know some of this, but on you go for everybody else.
You do. You were kind of almost there at the start of the well. So probably like a lot of people, totally by accident. Went to Strathclyde University Business School doing marketing and business law. In between sort of deciding what I would do next, an opportunity came in to work in a waste department in Falkirk Council for 3 weeks as a data assistant. So just really a data inputter into computer. Somebody I dearly hold and value is someone that took me by the hand and sort of showed this man what to do, sort of gave me the opportunity after 3 weeks to say, we've got a little project for you. And we think you'd be quite good at it. Would you like to do it? And that was rolling out Falkirk's 3-bin scheme at the time.
Wow.
So he sort of gave me that sort of opportunity to do that. And I always remember
at that time, if I remember, that was quite innovative, a 3-bin scheme, wasn't it? That was everything. What year would that be?
So that would be 2003. So at that point, I think there was only probably 2 other local authorities in Scotland had either just done it or about to do it. So there wasn't really a manual of how to do it. And there was an alternate weekly collection as well for residual waste. So again, quite unique in terms of how you were changing it. And, and there wasn't really a manual. That's what I kind of remember back to those days. There wasn't really a how-to manual of how do you tell the public what's coming? How do you cope with delivering 140,000 bins within a period and getting the message communicated about what people did with that bin? Because obviously you're going from a single bin system to a multi-bin system. There wasn't really that sort of experience that's there now in terms of people learning the lessons. And that was kind of the unique situation to be in. Quite fortunate in that point that kind of to get into the industry at that point and be part of that kind of explosion of these things developing and kind of getting in there early to kind of be in a position now, been quite lucky to seen all the good stuff, the bad stuff, the things we could do better, the things we should do better, and most certainly the things we should learn from that we maybe not have learned from yet. And that was a huge opportunity, but completely by accident.
You called that a little project there, Robin. It doesn't quite sound like that.
The funny story about that was that this individual who I class as a dear personal friend.
You're allowed to name him, because I know who it is.
So it's Charlie Devine, and I always remember the way Charlie kind of sells things is that'll be fine. So it's fine, there'll be no issue. So I remember after finishing the project, Charlie, it took about 16 months. I went to Charlie's office. Charlie, so how did that go, Robin? And I went, well, I said, well, if I knew what I was letting myself in for, I probably wouldn't have done it. and he put his arm around me and he says, that's why you were the perfect person for it. Because if MD knew what they were letting themselves into, they probably wouldn't have accepted the role.
Yeah.
So I've never actually managed to pay him back for that, but one day I'll probably
still
get him
thinking of
back.
it. Yeah.
Still thinking of it. Yeah.
It is quite incredible to think that was 20 years ago, and prior to that, the household waste collection was just residual waste. There was no recycling at all. That was the real start of collection of waste for recycling.
Yeah, it's scary to think, I'll be 20 years come September this year, and to think where we are now compared to the sort of how sort of almost simple it was back then to how complex it is now. It's kind of, you sometimes forget that part of that journey because you're in where you are just now. And it was a critical thing. I think the unique thing and how lucky I was, to be surrounded by people like yourself, Alistair, like Charlie, who took the time to explain to people. And, it's something I try and do now. It's probably 20 years of bitter experience. It's really important that you have those people that can have that knowledge, that are prepared to share it, because only then do you really sort of create the next generation to come up behind you, and for them to feel confident enough to approach you, to make those engage, to learn the lessons that they're going to need to learn to move on in their careers. And I think I was exceptionally lucky at that point to get the right influences at that point who gave their invaluable time for this sort of wet behind the ears individual to sort of learn those lessons, and to understand there will be missteps along the way. But to understand those missteps are natural and will happen, and it's what you do after that that's important, not really what you've done to get into situations. How you react to that's an important bit, not necessarily to, because everybody makes mistakes. And that's the critical thing that I was exceptionally lucky about back then, was to have that network of people that were willing to spend that time, which is what we try and do now to kind of put that back.
Mm-hmm. I think the waste industry in general is probably still quite good for building up that network. It's maybe not quite as good now with local authorities, a bit less staff that specialise in waste and so on. So I think the waste industry is good within itself, but I think we're pretty poor at verbalising that outside the sector, which was part of the idea of doing these chats, was to try and let people understand a bit more what goes on. That it's back down to the council's doing a daily collection. No, it's a weekly collection from every household in the council area. At times things will go wrong, at times a vehicle will break down, at times staff will be off ill, all these different things that happen, when you're providing a service like that.
Absolutely. And I always remember a famous Charlie Devine quote was, it's not what you know, Robin, it's who you can phone when it hits the fan.
I think Laura said almost the exact same sentence last week, didn't she?
It's absolutely true. And what you get is you understand that not everybody's willing to answer the phone. They're willing to answer the phone when things are going really well, but who really will answer the phone for you when you need that considered advice and honest advice? And that's honest to maybe say, oh, by the way, you were wrong. Right? Okay. Right? Okay, I can accept that. I'm big enough to accept that. And that's really kind of the invaluable lessons that you learn, or I've learned over the start in my career.
Yeah. So what's been your favourite? What's your favourite time? When in terms of your either a project or your role, or the most challenging? It could be favourite or challenging.
I would think the first one was always really good, because I don't think I've ever learned as much in a project like the 3-bin system, because you had to learn so quickly. And there was everything. But I think for me, the current role I'm in has certainly been the most challenging, but the most rewarding in terms of the outcomes and what we've delivered, in terms of the infrastructure we've delivered, and sort of the people that we work with, and what we're trying to do regarding the Pathways project to try and bring people in and train up future generations. So I would probably say the first one with the 3-bin system, and the current one. And I know that sounds very twee, that your first and last one. And I've been lucky enough to be involved with in some incredible projects. The first council to do 4 weekly residual waste collections, the first one to do 3 weekly residual waste collections, first 5 to do the first UK flexible plastics collections. Done some incredible stuff, and I've been lucky enough to be involved in. But I think where Cireco can go and what it's trying to do is something that excites me a lot, in terms of the people we have within the organisation to make that happen, with the same focus and same goals to be able to deliver that. But I can't forget also the first one, and the absolute lessons that taught me on the fly as we were going, and friendships are still valued to this day because of it. And I think that I'm just lucky to be involved with so many, but probably first and last where I am just now. And hopefully this is not the last one for Cireco. Hopefully there's more.
Absolutely, more to come.
But yeah, those definitely.
Yeah, that's quite a nice, well-rounded wee story, and that is quite invaluable, that learning when you don't know anything and just being the pressure's on to figure it out and ask things along the way. I think when you're uncomfortable, that's when you learn the most. So that's quite a nice message for everyone to say, just take the risk and try it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that sort of the biggest lesson I've got in trying to get across is never be scared to make a mistake. It's the fear of making a mistake that leads to the stagnation of what we try and do, because everybody wants to stick with the script, stick with how things are easy to go with. So never be scared to make a mistake, because the best lessons I have ever learned in my career is when it's gone wrong. Now, the true reaction is for how do you react to that mistake? So that's what shows you in your true colours, is how you rebound from that, react, and do you make that same mistake again? You know, if you make that same mistake again, there's a slight issue because you haven't clearly learned from the first time round and what you should have done to be able to do that. But never be scared. It's the fear of making a decision is what I see is holding some parts of the sector back, because it's the fear of the recrimination of that decision rather than the excitement of what that decision could lead to. And I think that is something that we need to, and not just in waste, probably across the sector, is we're quick to castigate people for making a mistake rather than actually praising the fact that we're trying something new. And I think for me, across the place, that's what we'd like to do, is never be scared to make that mistake. Just learn from it and move on from it.
Yeah, that's a great message. And that shows when you say stuff like that, you're, I suppose, in a bit of a leadership role at the moment, Robin, and it comes across the way you're talking, like that's kind of natural for you and to support people. So that's really good. And it kind of leads on to our next question. You've probably talked a wee bit about it, but is there anything specific about your current role that you're trying to achieve, or objectives for the future?
What I'd like to try and achieve is give people the same opportunities I had, and create that framework for people to learn. I think we've got that within the Cireco team to be able to do that, and to create the environment to understand that everyone has different skills and people can move differently within the organisation to do that. So I think what we're trying to do with the Pathways project is to do that, is to create that environment where people go and on the relevant training courses that they feel that their futures with Cireco, and understand that what they're doing just now might not be what they're doing in 5 years, 10 years, like we have changed in 5 to 10 years. And that's what I would like to do, is kind of make that possible, and really, again, to continue to grow the infrastructure that Scotland desperately needs, and make decisions that are not always about pennies and pounds, but help make decisions about employability and infrastructure, and not necessarily be entirely focused about the pennies and pounds of a decision, and more about the wider benefit that it gives.
Yeah, bang on. I think that's a good legacy to leave, if that's what your plan is, Robin. I like it.
I'm not planning on leaving yet.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it will happen overnight anyway. You're still, I think, a long way to go, but it's really good work. So yeah, that's really interesting, and it's good for, obviously, me and Alistair are always talking with our guests that that's what we're trying to do by asking people what their experience and their journey was, is to showcase to people, younger people coming up in the next generation, of different routes into the industry and stuff as well. So yeah, that's really, really interesting. So I suppose we ask everyone that's involved in waste since coming into the sector, do you think your role and your knowledge and experience has changed your opinions and your habits outside the workplace? So it could be getting on at your friends and family about recycling, or just your own habits that you notice, or things out and about. Do you think that's had an effect on you?
Definitely. I don't think anybody in this waste world looks at anything quite the same. When you're looked at, whether it's from a health and safety point of view and said, oh, somebody shouldn't be doing that, or just from a practicality, oh, that looks a good idea, maybe we should be doing some of that. So I think it does. Whether, I don't think nagging your family and friends works in particular, because they just look at you kind of funnily, but I think it certainly changes how you look at the wider world. And you try to obviously do that, what you want to do at home, and take that into the message. You don't want to be two different people, because it's that inconsistency catches up. So there's no doubt the lessons I've learned, and I think kind of covers it later on as well. People often think waste is waste, and I think some people forget just what actually doing resource management really means, and the difference it can, the things you'll do in a day. And this is why people will accidentally fall into the industry and then never leave it. And the reason they never leave it is you're dealing with everything in waste. It's not just, 1 minute you'll be a commodity trader, next minute you're a health and safety advisor, next minute you're a legal. You're having to look at the legal side of it, and then you're dealing with power markets and the energy supply markets, and so in any one day you could be dealing with 5 different skill sets that are separate to your whole core industry. And the longer you're in it, the more you pick up, you become a much more rounded thing. And I think people in the waste industry actually would be quite valuable in other industries, because you kind of deal with the multitude of it in any given day. And that's why people never leave, because the people that get into it and love it, no 2 days are the same, no 2 hours are the same, and that's what makes it interesting. So then, in terms of going back to what that does in home life, it means you can understand everything else. If you're phoning British Gas or you're phoning an energy company at home, you understand what's happening in the energy market, because maybe your landfills are supplying into that energy market, and your PPA arrangements are changing it in your gas management infrastructure. So you kind of have that, and you can understand the varieties that you kind of piece that together, and that's what you take home. Is that kind of, certainly I would never class myself as a well-rounded individual. I think there would be too many. I think there'd be too many that'd be able to show enough evidence to highlight that.
There'd be some challenges there, Robin. There'd be some challenges.
But that is what excites people that really into the resource sector, is that multitude of skills that it builds up, and the natural ability to do that is then you take that home and you bring that in to your working environment, and hope that then means that you at home you can bring that to your family and friends. Rather than specifically resource sector, you can bring that wider picture of things that you deal with.
To go off a total tangent, I saw, it's not a programme I watch on the TV, but that SAS programme was on last night, and one of the entrances is a bin man. And he was talking about how proud he was of his job and his role and his thing. It was actually really good from a sector point of view, just the way he came across about his
that's funny.
His career. So there you go.
Definitely.
Yeah, I always watch that show, Alistair, and that was actually the first thing I thought last night when he came on. I went, oh, I need to take Alistair, the bin man's on. He's doing great.
You need to clip that bit. You need to clip that bit and share it.
He was
so
proud of himself. It was nice to see, though. He was really taking pride in what he does and stuff like that. So yeah, that was nice.
I wasn't actually watching it closely enough to see if he actually.
He did do well, actually.
Did okay. We've now given the game away that we do these interviews a wee bit ahead of when they're broadcast, but never mind.
Still be relevant, we'll be fine. Yeah.
So in terms of, it's not all work, Robin. What do you do to relax and get away from work if you can?
Well, I've got a 5-year-old, so he certainly keeps me occupied at a bit. So sort of spending as much time with him as I'm possibly physically able to do, and certainly makes what I do even more important in my view, because you've got him. And when I'm not doing that, I try and pretend I'm away at a golf course or something like that. So I always like a wee game of golf with friends. I think spending time with friends is equally important as spending time at work. So I kind of love my work, but obviously I love spending time with my close family and certainly close friends as well.
I think you actually love spending time with your work friends as well.
Well, absolutely. I think, I think over the years I've been exceptionally lucky with the people I've been able to work with and learn from and things like that. And that's been some of the biggest fortune I've had in my career. I've worked with probably some of the most incredible people and had some of the most incredible teams to round. So for that and the adventures that we've been on together has created I'd like to think created a close bond with that, and certainly one of the things that I'm exceptionally grateful now is the team we have at Cireco, and my selfish opinion is up there with anything in the Scottish market. I think it collectively, the skill sets they have, and what I particularly like about it is their constant challenge to me to be better is something that continually I'm grateful for every day in what we get. So yeah, I think spending time with them is not too bad. Just that I wish they wouldn't talk back to me quite as much, but I have to accept it every now and then.
There you go. I think you probably answered the next one, but what's next for you in your career? I think you're staying put by the sound of it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if they'll continue to have me, I'd like to stay put. I've kind of always been kind of loyal in that regard. Obviously, had 15 years with Falkirk Council at the time, and then obviously this role came up, and I'll be here 6 years come August, believe it or not. So, sort of that means there's a lot to do here. I think what excites all of us here is you can see things getting done, and that is good. So certainly, until they force me out the door, kicking and screaming, my plan would be to stay here just a wee bit longer.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, you make it sound a great place anyway, so I'm sure they're happy to have you.
Well, I think I have to make it sound a good place because it's my fault if it's not. So I think I have to sort of sell that.
Yeah, we'll need to get someone else on your team and just make sure that everything you're saying, they all agree.
Just make sure I'm over the shoulder while you're doing it.
Yeah, exactly. So we've obviously talked quite a lot about your role in your job and your everything that you've done and want to do, but is there like one fact or piece of information from the sector that you want to share with everyone? We're trying to obviously share a lot of things that the general public wouldn't know outside of the sector, so have you got something in mind?
For me, it would be, what we kind of touched upon about, when somebody's handling your waste, what's involved in that. It's not just a case of it going somewhere and something magic happen. You'll be going and handing it to someone that might be a commodity trader at 2 o'clock, and then might be speaking to the regulator at half two, and then might be, it's the part of the journey that's not understood because it's end of pipe. People put it in the bin and think, but that's actually just absolutely the start of it. So that for me is sort of wider understanding of the expertise that's required to manage that, and from that angle, the opportunities job-wise that lie within the sector. You might be doing something completely funky at uni. You might have not thought the resource sector is, whether it be a chemist, whether it be a biologist, you might have never thought the waste sector as being a career path because you wouldn't have associated it with yourself. But to widen it out to say, actually, if you think of all the key skills that are required within the resource sector, it's such a broad-ranging aspect that it isn't necessarily environmentalist qualifications that you need. It's a wider aspect. So for me, it would be the understanding that, when you make that decision at home to put it in the bin, that's merely the start of the journey. There is so much more behind it, whether it's going to a materials recycling facility, whether it's going to energy from waste, whether it's going to an anaerobic digestion plant. The next stage of the journey is equally more complex than the journey it took to get to your bin. And sometimes I think that's not widely understood or appreciated in terms of that. So it'd be that sort of completing that sort of life cycle and understanding how difficult that bit is.
Cool.
Yeah.
No, good. What about any habits or changes you could propose to the public in terms of how we can improve how waste is managed? We've obviously talked about back in 2003 or whatever it was that the 2 bins went out. Now most councils in Scotland have got recycling bins, they've got food waste collection bins, but if you look at the stats, the recycling rate stayed pretty static for the last good number of years, 5, 6, 7 years. Anything you feel that needs to change going forward to get that rate up a bit?
Yeah, probably from a householder's level, understand what you do is important. I think there's a general malaise at the householder level that really, what does it matter if I don't do, or sort of I can't do, or and understanding the role that everyone has to play. Sometimes I think I've discussed this at numerous conferences, over the years, Alistair, kind of talk about the circle of responsibility. And really, as an industry, we have never actually fully got to grips with what the responsibility of the householder is. And I think, if I had one thing that I would like to sort is really get to grips with the fact is that, yeah, we all should be able to communicate. We all should do effective communications. It's critical. But equally, we need to get across to the householder, you do have a responsibility to do the right thing if provided with the services that we are providing, and we communicate it. But I think we've severely lacked and huge gaps in relation to what the responsibility of the householder is to engage with these. It's still a voluntary request to participate. And I think from that then we're missing a real key cog in terms of their key responsibility, because we can provide the collections and we'll put bin trucks round the households, but if it's not there and it's not separated into the containers it's been asked to, there's very little we can do beyond that point. And sometimes I think we let the responsibility fall too much on other parts of the chain, rather than going back to the heart of the matter and saying, well, every part of the chain has a responsibility, and to clearly lay out what those responsibilities are throughout the chain. And I don't think we do that. And I think that's something that I think needs urgent remedy.
Why do you think we don't do that? We've been aware that's been an issue for a while. Do you think it's politics? Do you think it's not a vote winner to say to the householder, you must use this, or
it's
is it a lack of awareness? Or
no, I don't think it's a lack of awareness. I think there's been enough people in the industry saying for enough years to highlight where the problem comes. It certainly wouldn't be a popular move, but neither was the smoking ban, neither was the minimum alcohol pricing. And we need to understand, if we all genuinely believe that there's a climate emergency, we need to understand that some of the decisions we'll have to make in the delivery of those decisions will not necessarily be popular. But if we communicate it in the right way to say, but this is why we're making them, we're not doing it because we woke up one morning and thought we want to be different. There's a rationale about why we're making it, and we need to be brave enough to make the decisions. And that's really the thing that comes across. If we're all really serious about this climate emergency, are we all really brave enough to make the decisions that are required to deliver on the rhetoric? And I think that rhetoric's across everything you see in terms of everything. And I think that's the critical thing for me, is we need to stand up and say, it is serious. We are going to put the infrastructure, and going back to this week when you saw the report released regarding having to pre-treat residual waste before going into EFW, well, to me, all that report does is highlight that there is no confidence that existing policies will work.
That's exactly. There's been a blog on the tip of my pen all week about that one. It kept popping up in my feed, and I was like, that's exactly what that's saying.
It's just that there's absolutely no confidence in whatever consultation we've had out, whatever policy we've got in place or future to put in place. That is just the first thing that openly admits that that's not going to work, because we're still going to have to pre-treat residual waste. If that's the case, then are we going to need to just be honest and say, well, what's the point of doing everything else, because it's not going to work? So I think I'm not decrying the authors of the report, because I think the reality is, if nothing changes,
they're maybe right.
They're maybe right, but I think it's a sad reflection that report needs to highlight that, rather than sitting and say, well, that's not acceptable and we should not be accepting that position. We need to make sure we don't need residual pre-treatment because our existing policies are effective. And I think, that for me is a critical thing, is we shouldn't be necessarily looking at reintroducing a new policy to fix a problem. We should be looking at the older policies and saying, well, why aren't they working, and how do we make them work to make sure that we don't spend? Because ultimately, when you talk about cutbacks and you talk about austerity measures, you're ending up paying 2 or 3 times for the same thing, and no industry can afford that. No sector can afford that. You're paying for an extensive front-end recycling systems that you then have to pay for extensive residual pre-treatment because the front-end extensive recycling systems aren't working. So you end up paying 2 or 3 times for the same thing, and I don't know any industry anywhere that could sustain that.
No, it's good. You're in the same. There was somebody accusing me sounding like a broken record in this subject the other day on LinkedIn. So, but it's good. It's good to find somebody else that sounds like a broken record about it as well. maybe one day. Maybe one day.
I would suggest it's not a broken record. It's just a record on repeat.
It is a record on repeat.
And I think we are equally tired with it having to be on repeat.
That's it. It's on repeat and nobody's listening. That's the problem.
There is that. Hopefully one day. And hopefully by things like this, we'll actually try and get the public to understand a bit more why it is important. And I think that is where the waste sector has failed a little bit, because we've not done that job well enough as a sector. Well, whether it was our responsibility to do or not, or whether it was somebody else's, but at the end of the day, we've not communicated that well to the public. Anyway, so moving on, we give every guest a wee opportunity to share either a piece of industry jargon, an acronym, that you use or you're fond of, or anything you wish. And you're not allowed to be like Grant Keenan that used about 50. We're restricting you to one.
Okay, I mean, probably for me it'd be Murph, because that kind of dominates my day. So materials recycling facility, we'll always say Murph, and kind of people don't know it will go, was that a Smurf? Was that one of the Smurfs, or one of that's kind of the materials recycling facility, sort of when wasters sort of say Murph and people go, sorry, don't get that.
What's that?
Yeah, that's not a word. Yeah.
So kind of probably that's the one that comes. Probably the most relevant one is POPs is coming our way.
Yeah.
So the persistent organic pollutants will certainly be one that will be front.
We have mentioned that a couple of times recently in the podcast. But it's all very well. It's still under debate as to what's actually going to happen, isn't it? We know the regulations we need to comply with. It's just how that's going to be applied. So it'll be interesting. But that's another bit that the focus is purely on councils and waste operators to sort this problem out. And the problem of POPs was not generated by the waste industry; it was generated by the furniture suppliers putting this stuff on the market.
Yep.
And that's common issue in the waste industry, that the waste industry has to pick up the problem that other people have left.
Yeah. So. And kind of almost have to come up with a solution on the fly, because it's kind of put together. Then right, okay, go and deal with it, and then when it starts to happen, people start to realise it's maybe not quite as what they thought it would be. And you kind of have to develop and learn that on the fly as best as you can.
Yeah. There you go. Anyway, I'm going to give you a magic wand, Robin, and I think you maybe answered this already. Actually, one thing you would love to see changed. You can keep to the same answer you gave, or you can.
For me, I would just everybody to understand what the role is and the responsibility we have. I think the POPs you mentioned there, Alistair, is about it was produced onto the market by people, the producer, and then we're ending up having to do it. Just that circle of responsibility, understand everybody in the whole chain, understand what their responsibility is, and to be held accountable for the decisions that are made. Consistently, I think the wrong people are held accountable or end up with the responsibility. So my magic wand would be make the right people responsible and make everyone aware what their responsibilities are.
Yeah.
That would get the sea change, not playing round the edges. If Alistair Meldrum Incorporated knew that you were going to be left with the bill, if you did something, you would certainly have that absolutely forefront of your mind when you were making product decisions or company decisions, rather than at the moment where it's not really going to be my responsibility, so I don't need to really worry or think about that. And I think same with householders when they're making that decision for disposal. Ultimately, no consequence of actions, so what's the responsibility? So make everyone aware of the responsibilities within that and make sure they're held accountable to the decisions they make.
Yeah, I think that's ideal. I mean, I think just I was thinking back to what you were saying earlier about talking about everyone's involvement in the climate emergency and stuff. And what I hear, especially from people outside of the sector, is they think, oh, it's so huge and so overwhelming that there's nothing I can do. Like me as an individual, it's like completely too much to think about. And there's your very answer, like but there actually is something you can do, and the infrastructure's in place. You can start by putting your rubbish in the right bin, and it's just getting that, like how important and how much a change that will make. I think people are completely underestimating it, and you know that's one that I think people. I was on a webinar recently, people talking about like I don't know the exact term, something like climate anxiety or something like that, eco anxiety and stuff, and they were saying because there's so much pressure and they don't know what to do, but like there's a solution already in place. So I think it's how do we get the message to the householders or the general public to say you don't even have to do anything, you don't have to spend any money. We've got it right on the end of your driveway or in your back door, whatever it is, please just do it. And I think that's the biggest challenge, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it's the one we all try and do. And you go back to your earlier question about what you said about what you try and do in your home life. And it's that, you know, if the one thing that your family and friends around you, one within your circle of influence is to try and make them understand the decisions they make are equally as important that what they do today. And that's the thing you take back from what the industry we work with to your close circle is how important those individual decisions can be. Because you can only do what you can do. You can't control anything else. But look yourself in the mirror. You know, there's a poem called "The Man in the Glass." That's always worth reading.
We've not had any poetry yet in this podcast. So are you gonna rhyme it up for us here?
I've never said, but effectively it says kind of if you sort of you're kind of only cheating the only person you really cheat in life is the person in the glass, the person looking back in the mirror.
Yeah.
And that's the case. If you kind of look back, if you can look in that mirror at all points in life and be happy with the person that's looking back at you, then you've not cheated the man in the glass.
Like that. I'll do a bit of research. I'll get that linked for everyone when we post the episode out.
So I think that for me is the critical one. Is we try and, so going back to your climate anxiety and that's fine, but ultimately if you can be content with the decisions you make when you're looking back in the mirror, then that's ultimately all you can do, and you can understand you've done your bit, but not to get frustrated that you think that's not enough.
Yeah.
It's just to get content that you've done what you can, and you'll continue to do that. And I think that's the bit that's important.
Yeah.
The example I quite often use in training courses, Robin, and I think I maybe mentioned this before, is if you say to people, everybody at some point in their life buys a bottle of water. If you reuse that bottle once, and if everybody in the UK did that once, that's 60 million bottles less that need to be recycled. And that's a huge, if you think in that scale, that's a massive impact on the environment to have 60 million bottles less. If we reuse it twice, it's 120 million.
Yeah.
And when you start thinking that's at scale, it's like, that's why every action is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the bit about what I would like to teach my 5-year-old son is because modern society bombards you with information, is not to get anxious about what you can't control. It is just be comfortable about what you can control and feeling that you can do everything. And I think that's where the climate anxiety things are outside your control. You can only control what you can control. No different to the work environment. You can only do what you can do. And you can only make the decisions you can make. Everyone else is an external influence. And I think going back, that's what, the one thing that I would like to teach my child kind of going forward is don't get anxious about that. Don't get anxious about things. Just look in that mirror and make sure you don't cheat the man in the glass.
Yeah, I can apply that to everything as well. So I think that's a really nice message. That would be a perfect time to end it there. Such a good message. But I do have one more question, because I think you might be the man, Robin, to be able to kind of answer this one. And you can refer this back to any resources from your organisation as well, or just general experience from your own journey. But for anyone wanting to follow not even a similar career path, but get into the sector, do you have any advice or resources that you want to share? And we can certainly link it as well if there's anything online that you could point people to. But just kind of off the top of your head at the moment, what would you advise to give someone starting out?
Never say it's not your job. The biggest opportunities that have come my way is by saying I might try that.
Mm-hmm.
Is never, your degree will get you so far, but what you do with what your skills are as a person will determine. So never say it's not my job. That is what gave me the opportunities that I've got, was always sitting there saying, well, actually, can I try that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you're not paid for it. Yeah, well, I know that, but I wouldn't mind actually seeing how that works.
See how it's done. Yeah.
And I think, for too long we kind of, as a society, discredit the key roles across what makes all the cogs work. I was lucky enough to get experience of doing everything from collection, going out with the bin crews, going on a picking line. To do that, never think yourself, that's not my job. That's when opportunities arise.
That's when you learn the most, when you get out to these jobs, isn't it? That's when you learn how it really works.
Yeah, and on the base of it at the time, you wouldn't see that there was an opportunity going to come from that. And I think too often nowadays people want that instant gratification of, I want something for that now, and rather than understanding that you're building the foundational pieces for your future career, and that's not necessarily a benefit that you'll get now, and it might not even be a benefit you realise until 10 years later. You go, well, I remember how that worked. I remember how I was nearly seasick in a picking line. So I can understand how that. So stuff like that is the key thing. Is never say it's not your job, because that will close more doors than it will open.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It gives people as well, because I think that's the variation in the sector that can confuse people of where they want to go or how they want to go, because it's not laid out in front of them. So taking those wee jobs that don't necessarily seem that they make sense to what you do or what you know could end up as exactly what happened to you, the path for your whole career.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
We're gonna search for this one person that did plan to go in the waste management sector. We're going to find that one person yet.
Well, our very own Jane Bond should get a
I know.
mention, because I said to Jane away at the start of this podcast, we were talking about writing the questions, and to be fair, we've been proven right so far. The question, how did you end up in the sector? Nearly everyone says, yeah, I ended up here by accident. And I was laughing with Jane, and she was like, well, I must be that one sad person. That's exactly what I went and studied at uni, and this is where I wanted to be. And I thought, well, there we go.
Okay.
She's the one.
So
yeah, she's a bit of the odd one out though by the sounds of it. But
perfect.
Definitely.
All right. Well, thank you.
Right.
I think that's us exhausted our question list. All I would say is, thank you very much for sparing us the time and participating, and hope the listeners find that interesting.
yeah, it was great to hear. I think Alistair so far has known everyone quite well, so he knows a bit of everyone's background, but I do get on and get, oh, that's really interesting, oh, that was a great story. So I do actually really enjoy the chats, and I'm sure everyone else does too.
I feel as if I'm cheating a wee bit that I know everybody quite well so far. I'll need to get some more people I don't know that well. So we'll find some people. We'll find some people that don't know me in the sector.
I don't know about that, to be honest.
That's probably quite hard, I think, Robin, isn't it?
That'll be hard, yeah.
So there you go. Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
No problem. Take care. Thanks, folks.